Today, we are jumping into one of the most epic, most legendary periods in history, the saga of China's Three Kingdoms. We're talking about almost 100 years of brilliant generals, cunning schemes, and absolutely massive battles. And we're going to boil it all down into one single, straightforward explainer. Let's do it. Okay, so here's the quick roadmap for our story. It all starts with the Eastern Han Dynasty, which had been around for 400 years and, well, on its last legs. We'll see how that massive empire shatters apart into the chaos of the Three Kingdoms period, before eventually a new power comes along and glues it all back together as the Western Jin Dynasty. It's a tale as old as time, really, from unity to chaos and right back to unity again. So, to make sense of this huge story, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll look at how the whole thing kicked off, then the one massive battle that changed everything. We'll meet the 3 rival kingdoms, see what happened when the original heroes started to fade away, and finally, watch how a completely new family rose up to take it all. Right, so our first stop, the end of the Han Dynasty. How does a 400-year-old empire just fall apart? Well, it wasn't one single thing. It was more like a perfect storm of corruption at the top and disaster for everyone else. The whole empire was basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark. You see, this didn't happen overnight. It was a chain reaction. First, the government was a mess, totally paralyzed by infighting. They couldn't deal with a massive peasant uprising called the Yellow Turban Rebellion. So what did they do? They told local governors to raise their own armies to fight it. And that worked, kinda. But it created a way bigger problem, because these new warlords with their own private armies, they weren't about to give that power back. And the final nail in the coffin was when one of these warlords, the tyrant Deng Zhao, marched into the capital and took the emperor hostage. That was it. The Han Dynasty was done, and it was a total free-for-all. And out of all this chaos, a few key players start to rise to the top. You've got Yuan Shao up north with his huge army. Then there's Cao Cao, this incredibly brilliant and ruthless operator. Down south, you have the Tiger of Jiangdong, Sun Jian, and then there's Liu Bei, a guy who claims he's related to the emperor but is basically starting with nothing. These are the names you need to know because they're the ones who are about to shape everything. Okay, so after years and years of these warlords battling it out, one man basically beat everybody else. Cao Cao. He unified the entire north of China, the heartland of the empire. And with that done, he set his sights south. He was going to crush the last little bits of resistance and reunite all of China once and for all. And look, on paper, this shouldn't have even been a fight. It was a complete mismatch. Cao Cao's invasion force was enormous, a seemingly unstoppable juggernaut. And who was standing against him? A shaky, last-minute alliance between Sun Quan in the southeast and Liu Bei, who was literally on the run from Cao Cao. So you gotta ask, right? How in the world could this little group of underdogs even hope to survive? Well, the answer is a combination of brilliant strategy and just knowing your home turf. You see, the Southerners knew the Yangtze River. They knew the weather. Cao Cao's troops, they were Northerners not used to fighting on water, and a lot of them were already sick from the climate. The alliance decided to use all of that to their advantage with one incredibly gutsy plan. And what a plan it was. It was just sheer genius. They pretended a squadron of their ships was going to surrender. Cao Cao let them get close, but they were actually packed with flammable reeds and oil. These fire ships smashed into Cao Cao's fleet, which he had actually chained together to make them more stable for his seasick troops, and the whole thing just went up in smoke. This one battle changed everything. It completely stopped Cao Cao in his tracks and guaranteed that China would be split into 3 parts. So, the victory at Red Cliffs created this brand new situation. Suddenly, no one was strong enough to conquer the others. And this kicked off a long, tense stalemate. This is when the era of the 3 kingdoms officially begins. So, let's meet the contenders who would rule China for the next 60 years. So first, in 220 AD, Cao Cao's son makes it official. He kicks the last Han emperor off the throne and establishes the Kingdom of Wei up north. Well, Liu Bei isn't going to let that stand. Claiming he's the true heir, he declares himself emperor of Shu Han in the west. And of course, not to be left out, Sun Quan declares himself emperor of the Kingdom of Wu down south. And just like that, the 3-way split of China is locked in. Now, for a long time, this 3-way balance of power was held together by these legendary, larger-than-life figures we've been talking about. But here's the thing, they couldn't live forever. And as that first generation of heroes started to die off, things got a lot more complicated and a lot more dangerous. And man, just look at how fast the old guard disappeared. It was a devastating wave of losses. Cao Cao goes in 220. Then the legendary warriors Guan Yu and Zhang Fei are killed. Their lord, Liu Bei, dies a year later, supposedly of a broken heart. And finally, Shu's genius strategist, Zhuge Liang, dies on his very last campaign. With all these titans gone, their kingdoms were left vulnerable, not just to each other, but to new threats from the inside. And the biggest internal threat was quietly growing in Wei, the most powerful of the three kingdoms. You see, while Cao Cao's family was on the throne, the real power, the control of the armies, the politics, was slowly but surely being gathered up by one incredibly cunning family, the Sima clan. And they made their move in one single brilliant stroke. The head of the family, Sima Yi, had been pretending to be old and sick, basically retired, but while the emperor and his regent were out of the capital, he launched a lightning-fast coup. He seized the military, executed anyone loyal to the Cao family, and took total control. From that day on, the emperors of Wei were just puppets. The Sima family was really running the show. So, you might think this whole thing ends with a final, epic clash between Wei, Shu, and Wu, right? Well, nope. The end of the Three Kingdoms didn't come from the original heroes. It was engineered by this new family, the Simas, who just used Wei's power to finish the job Cao Cao had started. And once they were in charge, the dominoes fell incredibly fast. First, the Sima-controlled army of Wei invaded and conquered the kingdom of Shu. With one rival down, Sima Yan, the new head of the clan, didn't need to pretend anymore. He forced the Wei emperor to step down and declared himself the first emperor of a brand new dynasty, the Jin. All that was left was Wu, and just a few years later, they fell too. And there it is, 280 AD, the year the last king of Wu surrendered. After nearly a century of division and war, China was finally one country again. The epic, legendary, and bloody era of the Three Kingdoms was over. But, when you look back, this whole story is so much more than just a list of battles. It's a timeless story about ambition, about loyalty, about what happens when a country tears itself apart. And it really leaves you with a huge question. After all that bloodshed, after millions of lives were lost, what's the real price of unity? And what can we learn from the people who fought and died for it?